you're free, and freedom is beautiful. And, you know, it'll take time to restore chaos and order, but order out of chaos, but we will.
Thank you for joining us tonight. It had all the elements of a thriller crime movie. An undercover federal agent gains the trust of a dark, mysterious group, then springs the trap in a Southern California paradise. But the FBI says it was all too real, and the criminals were after sex with little boys.
I spent 26 years in the FBI, many of those years in an undercover capacity. I was the undercover FBI agent in 20 administratively approved undercover operations. I was a contract killer, a drug dealer, a white-collar criminal. I spent 3 years infiltrating NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. NAMBLA was my most difficult case. Psychologically, it was gut-wrenching to listen to men talk about their justification on why it was proper to have sex with boys.
If we meet and try to keep a connection, I think that's really right now where it's at. It's not a cool time for us to be out and vocal about this. I can be out and vocal about being gay. I consider myself that. I consider myself also an atheist, and I'm out about that. And but those things are different. When you go around saying you like to run your hand through a boy's hair or kiss him or do other things like that, it doesn't get the same reaction.
We met in a nondescript rehearsal hall, hardly the type of place where an organization as vaunted as NAMBLA claimed to be deserved to be meeting. To begin the conference, we went around the room and everyone introduced themselves.
My name is David.
My name is Sam, or Samuel Lindblad. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and a year and a few months out of prison.
Joseph, you want to...
No one talked about abolishing age of consent laws. They came together to network with like-minded individuals. They came together to learn where they could go to have sex with little boys.
I'm Todd, divorced dentist from Dallas.
I'm Steve, from Pittsburgh.
I first found out about this organization, the Boy Scouts.
I'd heard about NAMBLA maybe over 20 years ago, really.
Over the years, I've been a member of the New York chapter, the Los Angeles chapter, and the San Francisco chapter.
During my 3-year infiltration of NAMBLA, I corresponded with about 165 members of the organization, all of whom were in prison. Some I sent Christmas cards, some I corresponded as a pen pal.
I have been active in the Christmas card, the pen pal program. And
their letters were graphic. Many described in rich detail what they did to little boys. This organization was hiding behind the First Amendment. A.W. Tozer said that the only book that should ever be written is one that is forced out by inward pressure. I spent 3 years infiltrating NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. After that investigation, that was the book that was forced out of me. I wanted to alert the world to this organization that preys upon our sons.
Classical Greece was a society of individualists, where free thinking was ardently encouraged, whether it be in philosophy, religion, or sex.
We tend to think of the Greeks as somehow a sexually liberated people. They were not hung up about the same kinds of things that we're hung up about. Their acceptance of sex is a natural part of life. is something that makes them at the same time a very attractive culture and at the same time a very foreign culture.
The lascivious behavior of the elite Greek male was mirrored in the antics of his gods. The all-powerful Zeus was a philandering husband whose sexual appetites ran the gamut from goddesses to mortal women to young boys. Other creatures from Greek mythology were more cartoonish in their carnal cravings.
Pan and the satyrs represented the animal aspect of sexual desire. They are usually represented as not only insatiable, but always in pursuit. It's a little bit like the Roadrunner cartoons, where Wile E. Coyote never actually attains his goal, but he's defined by his pursuit of it.
Romantic love between men and women was not the norm in classical Greece. Marriages were largely economic arrangements to ensure bloodlines and inheritances. Greek wives, who were usually 10 to 20 years younger than their spouses, were expected to tend to matters of hearth and home, but little else. Meanwhile, for their husbands, classical Greece was truly a man's world.
The Greeks believed that women are more sexually driven than men are. And at the same time, they demanded a great deal of sexual probity from adult married women. That mismatch of conventions generates an interest in, well, if women are not allowed to go out and get sex the way men are allowed to go out and get sex, then how do they get it? And, well, they get it through dildos.
If a woman was in the market for marital aids, a prime shopping area was the city of Mylittini on the island of Lesbos. Modern-day connotations aside, lesbian women had quite an affinity for the opposite sex, a fondness they expressed with gusto. Plato himself sang the praises of love between men in the Symposium. Male homosexual relationships often involved an older man with a younger boy, a practice known as pederasty.
Certain subcultures in Greece, particularly the elite subcultures, romanticized the relation between an adult male and a pubescent boy. It was a rite of passage in a sense. There were certain rules of self-restraint which were imposed upon the older male partner in cases like this, and it became a kind of romanticized relationship, a kind of a courtship that never involved penetration of the younger boy.
One of the most famous tales of male homosexual love in Greece is the legend of the sacred band of Thebes. This valiant army of 300 lovers allegedly fought against Alexander the Great and his father at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC.
The young Alexander the Great saw a heap of bodies, beautiful bodies, all piled on top of each other, all dead of honorable wounds, and he asked the subaltern, "Who are these brave men?" And he was told, "This, sir, is the sacred band of Thebes." And they all died avoiding disgrace in the eyes of their lovers.
In the halakha, in Yeridea, that's the second section of the 4 sections of halacha called the Shulchan Aruch, the set table. In chapter 266, halacha 3, 4, 5, and 6, he describes how the circumcision is to be done. He says after the cutting, the mohel does what is called mitzitza. Mitzitza means to suck, and it means doing so with his mouth. And one could say, well, why can't you use a tube? Well, you could, technically, but it's not the custom as to how it was done. Now, why is it that way? Well, you could say that in the olden days you didn't have tubes. Now you can have tubes, so why not? The answer, as I thought about it, is that it's not as effective because the tube does not seal as well, it's not as pliable, and furthermore, it's not as quick and it's not as close. You have to have a quick suction action. You have to have more pliability. And also, there's a theory, some people feel that it is, some people feel that it's not, that the saliva of a human being has some antiseptic qualities. And it's actually brought in the halacha of the Talmud that the saliva of certain people were actually used as curatives. And so saliva is not a bad thing. Saliva has elements of cleaning, of antiseptic elements within it, and the other part of it is that the suction process of the mouth is quicker, more pliable, and it's more exact and works much better.
Four years ago, a Republican running for Congress in Indiana said, don't vote for his Democratic opponent, because if he won, Nancy Pelosi would become Speaker, and she would let me enact the radical homosexual agenda. So let me own up to that agenda. It's to be protected against violent crimes driven by bigotry. It's to be able to get married. It's to be able to get a job. And it's to be able to fight for our country. Hey, for those who are worried about the radical homosexual agenda, let me put them on notice. 2 down, 2 to go.
Now I want you to imagine, brothers and sisters, we're going to take a trip and understand what our ancestors went through. It's a horrible trip where we stripped from our families. We taken by a wicked slave master and they put us on ships, put us in the holds of ships where we can't even breathe. Some brothers are so sick and sad being in the holds of these ships that they don't even want to live, so they don't want to eat. And so the Europeans say, no, if you don't eat, you'll die. And I got to sell you at the top price on the market. So they bang his teeth out with metal chisels and then stick a funnel down and feed the pig slop. Brothers and sisters lying next to one another, listening to the screams and moans of his daughter or his son or his mother or her son as they're raped or brutalized or beaten. Sisters are taken up to the top tier, and 20 or 30 Europeans might all rape her right there, ejaculate on her right there. And then if she gets so sick and crazy she can't take it, maybe she jumps overboard. And so the Atlantic shark begins his new route that he begins to take and migrate in a whole new route, because they learn the routes from the slave ships, because they know that there'll be fresh African meat for them as they travel along these seas. Can you imagine the depths of the ocean, brothers and sisters? Can you imagine what it'd be like being a black woman who's always been respected and revered, being treated in ways that you can't even possibly imagine? Can you imagine being a black man so helpless that you have to sit and listen to the abuse of your women and your children while you can do nothing? This is where the beginning of the feminization process occurs. Don't forget that on these ships, these Europeans weren't only raping black women. They was raping little boys. His highest and noblest aspiration. They were raping grown men even. What you gonna do? Yeah, they ain't gonna do it to me. What you gonna do with chain at your legs and chain behind your arms? If somebody got sick or was too rebellious, they just pick you up and throw you overboard into the depth of the ocean to be eaten by sharks. It was nothing. This is us beginning to turn into a whole nother people. When we got to America, we didn't know that they had these things called sex farms. And on these farms, a grown white males would come and they could purchase our women. So they would come and our women would be used like merchandise. And they could come up and fill our women where they had no sense of their bodies and no ability to protect themselves. And they would always get a black male who was effeminized. No longer does he see himself as the protector of the black woman. And he would go around and say, hey, look what I got. Almost like a mannequin. Look, you want this type? Look what she got available for you. Right. Oh, these are the kind of things she does. Oh, do you want this one? Oh, do you want this one? Yeah. These are the type of things they did to us where we had no control over our own bodies. No control over what we did. And a black man didn't exist in the way he existed at home, where we protected our women and our children. No, we had to sit by on a day-to-day basis and watch them totally humiliate us. But not only did we watch them humiliate us, we had to participate in our own destruction and humiliation. So we began to covet these type of jobs where we could go around and show our women off. We began to take joy in doing them because we didn't feel that there was anything left. And so we were made into monsters. But you know, the white male, the women, you know, the women is cool that he could come about women, but he likes things a little different. That's not really his taste. If it's going to be a female, he would prefer a little girl. We talked about his development in the caves and hills of Europe. So they had sections of the sex farm with just little girls between the ages of 8 and 18. And they would dress the little girls in scantily dressed clothing and make the little girls dance around and gyrate. And while they would tell them to shake their behinds, and they would always have the most well-dressed black male on the sex farm. He had his high hat and his suit. He was the best-dressed brother in the place. And he would stand there with the sisters and he would gyrate while these little girls would gyrate and show their bodies off for these grown white males to come and purchase them. That's right. And this is the kind of thing that we went. And I know we're so far removed from slavery that we can't really imagine no black man standing around gyrating, showing our sisters off, little girls and our women as some type of sex objects for grown males, dressing our little girls up as if they're some type of sex meat market or what have you. Yeah, right. I know we're so far removed from the slave plantation that our minds can't fathom that. But I want you just to try to imagine being so effeminized that you don't see yourself as the protector of your women. Right. Instead, you see yourself as the salesman of the sexual exploits for our women. Yeah. I want you to imagine being in a circumstance like that. Can you imagine a black man standing before the world saying, here are our women. Look at her shake her thing. Yeah. Look at her show herself. She's really a sexual object. Do you want her? That's right. How much do you want to pay for this one? Well, brothers and sisters, we got to be real careful. Because we don't watch it. Well, we think we were.
Come on with that.
We might find ourselves having our women being faceless and nameless, gyrating before the world as the sexual tools for the Europeans. See, Negroes always talk about slavery being over, but Negroes don't read. So the Negroes don't know what slavery was. And if you don't know what slavery was, and if you don't know what happened during slavery, Negro, you don't know when it's over. How do you know when it's over? How do you know when it's over? I mean, can you imagine? I know you can. Us selling our women to white males and they can buy her like bread in the exchange, going to the market, and she's some meat that can just be bought and sold. You see, that's what we were doing, brothers and sisters. That's where we've been, but see, we've forgotten. So consequently, all of the damage that was done to us during this time has us in a state now, a very frightening state, where we actually see it as acceptable to show our women off, just like we did on those sex farms, as sexual toilets and play toys for white males, or anybody who wants them. That's an effeminized black male, because he's been stripped of the inside that made him a man, that told him that it's my job to protect our women. I want you to imagine where that leaves us, brothers and sisters. What gets us in this condition that we're doing today, where we are today, is where we were yesterday. And we think that we've come a long way because we don't know the sexual types of things they were doing to us. And consequently, we're destroying ourselves before the world. We're telling the world that we want to be destroyed. We're telling the world that our women are here for sexual exploit. That's what they're here for. And we're not men because we're not here to protect them. We're here as salesmen to sell them to you.
That's right.
And I want you to look at these images because they're the same images.
Same.
But it gets even worse because, you know, the cracker, you know, little girls is cool. You know, grown females are cool, but his highest and noblest aspiration to be with that little boy.
That's right.
I mean, that's where it all started from. I should say the beginning of it was with the little boy. So if you went on a slave plantation, the white males who really wanted to get down and dirty, they would go to a different section of the slave plantation. They would go to the section of the plantation with the little boys.
That's right.
And our little boys would be dressed up in earrings and makeup. And the white male would go around, ooh, oh, this is the one I like, oh. And they would be made to act as females.
That's right.
And presented as females.
Don't talk about
And the whites would oil our bodies up, the little boys up, and makeup, put the makeup on them, and the earrings, and sell them on the meat market. This is the feminization of black people, where the whites begin to see us through their own sick, sordid eyes, and then we begin, under the system of slavery, to act those very things out. These are the things they did to us.
That's right.
And so, can you imagine black men, us walking crackers around, showing off black males and black children as sexual objects to the world?
Look at that.
This is what we did. Our little girls are little boys. So our whole minds are being devastated. And like I said, if you don't know where you've been, then you can't quite recognize where you are. Can you imagine the day that we could take children and make them look like they're adults, ready for sexual exploit, and be acting these things out before the world and saying little black babies are really adult, and they can do adult things, which means they're ready for any sexual exploits that you might have. Our own children. If we don't know where we've been, we don't know where we are. We don't know what we're heading for. But I tell you what, it only gets worse because, see, those little black boys who were molested and raped in that way, well, then they get older. And so they had something for those little boys. They had a specific job for those little boys.
You totally remove any kind of moral consciousness from the world. In order to do that, first you got to get the lion. So you got to take that black male out, because that's the most feared and fierce being on this planet. And with his mind correct, he can. There's no war that we can't win collectively. That's why you got to keep us separated in the dissension. And then the second part of it, even if you don't totally take the man down, if you can take his woman and turn her against him, the black man can be any other force on this planet except the black woman. That's one force that we cannot beat, because that's supposed to be our complement. That's where our strength comes from. That's our mama. And if mama is turned against us, we can't win. So that's what we see with this homosexual agenda. It's an international agenda for destruction.
Right. So, like, one of the tools that I'm noticing that they're using is the media, and specifically television and some of the television shows that they're putting out here. I was watching a television program the other day called Empire. And, you know, it's about a brother from the inner city who rose to the top of his profession through the sweat of his brow, working hard. And
yes, sir. If we look at the film Empire, and I think it's one of the most dangerous things that has actually hit in a long time, probably the most dangerous thing since The Wire, probably. Maybe more dangerous than that, maybe more like The Color Purple. It does a lot of systemic damage to our people. First of all, Lee Daniels is the one who produced this program. Now, Lee Daniels is the same one that did Precious.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Same one that did Monsters Ball.
Right.
Monsters Ball. Right. And if you look at the theme,
Tony Browder did a big thing on Lee Daniels. Yeah.
Now, let's understand. Now, Lee Daniels is a practicing white sex offender, which is what we call homosexual and pedophile. He's openly in a relationship with a white male. Okay, a homosexual relationship. Now, he's not hiding it. I mean, he said, and this is him talking, when interviewed about this program, The Empire, he said part of why I made this, one of the main reasons, was because we need to end what he called homophobia in the black community. So we want to promote homosexuality as something acceptable. What we have to understand is this, and this is one of the tools that's being used against black people, And it's a lot in this thing that points to the destructive nature of what we talking about. What we talking about, straight black pride movement. One, you just hit on the straight part. Here you have a situation where the most talented of all his sons, Terrence Howard and his empire, is a homosexual. Right. And you can see how the mother is the one, the black woman, rubber stamping the behavior that will prevent her daughters from ever having any husbands and children. Rubber stamping a homosexual, jumping on board with them and trying to attack the male. So that's just one aspect of the straight. If we look at the black part, Terrence Howard is a mulatto. The female that he married, he left his black wife in jail for 17 years and never wrote her or did anything. But he goes out and gets this, I don't know what she is. I don't know if she's white. I don't know what it is. She's something. She's a something other. And so what we see is, again, the promotion of the black man, not being with the black woman, not the woman that gave him $400,000 to start the business, but with something else. And to completely abandon her. So it's teaching our people that the black man and woman shouldn't be together, but that the homosexual is the most talented one amongst our people, and that's where everything is going. So this thing is designed to do major maximum damage to our people. And so they use the media to implant the ideas in our people's minds, particularly our women and children, because then those, if it goes into our women's minds, they feed it to the children. Once you feed it to the children, you lose a whole generation. But also those women then, your woman who you got along with well the night before, she watches this movie that's telling her that the black woman is supposed to be at war with a black man. She gets filled with this, and you come home from a hard day's of work, and then you got a war in your hand because she doesn't realize that this has been implanted in her head and that she's been turned against her own people. So this is a major tool to promote homosexuality, but not just homosexuality. The divorce between the relationship between a black man and woman.
The oldest son, he got away from.
The oldest one, now the most intelligent one, is married to the white female. And the white female is trying to help him undermine his other brothers and sisters. So that's being sold. So the intelligent one is with the white female. The most talented one is a homosexual. And then the low life of the group is a black man who's not supposed to be a homosexual, but he's more effeminate than a homosexual if you look at his behavior. So we have something that is doing maximum damage. We don't, and again, I know that the issue we had with the Cosby Show, it never addressed racism. I mean, that program acted like racism didn't exist, and it does. But in terms of decency and good standards, a strong black mother, a strong black father, children that understand that the parents, grandparents, a real black family scenario, we don't get that anymore. In fact, what we get is a whole assault on Bill Cosby, then used as a justification to remove, because you know, right now, a lot of people who want to raise their children with good standards, you know what they let them watch? The reruns of the Cosby Show. Well, guess what? Now they're using something to attack Bill Cosby to say, let's pull that off. So now if you sit a child down in front of a television, you literally, between the cartoons and the homosexuality and the devastation, all of the interracial dating foolishness that's presented to us, all of the images of negative black women and negative black men, you get nothing telling a black person that a black man and woman can have a positive family environment, and that's the best solution for us. And so it's leading to genocide.
You airheaded black feminists are going to more than likely scream bloody murder and call me all sorts of black women bashers after just reading the title of this video. But you sisters with common sense will listen to what I have to say. A woman's validation and acceptance is only credited as they show the family and the village that they are sworn by their maternal duty as mothers to carry the lineage of their people onward and make sure that their culture is preserved and kept fresh for future generations. Now, what do I mean by this? When I was growing up, whether I was in my own home, my neighbors' homes, or other relatives' homes, you would always see old black and white photographs that were 40, 50, and even 60 years or older of ancestors who had passed on because those older black folks who were not that far removed from the time period of chattel slavery and who had also lived a great portion of their lives through Jim Crow felt that it was very important and necessary to keep photos, mementos, and keepsakes so we would never abandon our heritage. I can remember as early on as 4 or 5 years old staring at some of these old photos and my grandmother, great aunts, or others would wrap an arm around me and say, "That's your great uncle such and such. He was a Pullman porter back in the 1920s and 30s. That's a photo of your grandfather and his little brother when they served in World War II. This is your great aunt who owned her own seamstress business." And as a child, you would see these images of people who look just like you, and you would hear legendary stories about them. And you would say, you know what? I come from something. And it was through this inheritance that you were proud of your family. You protected that family even as a little kid when you got in silly squabbles on the playground. As you got older and became a bit more mature, this carried over to pride in your community, when you and others who you grew up with together and formed tight bonds with would look out for one another in high school and make sure that no one came through your neighborhood looking to specifically start trouble and take from your families. And whether you stayed in that community or not, when you were all grown up, you took those core values with you wherever you went and implemented them into the families you started. And you must remember that although men more than likely taught you fighting skills and self-defense techniques, the burning desire to fortify the community was heavily inspired by those women of previous generations and time periods who sought the validation and protection of their men by holding their culture in high regards because they wanted their male offspring to grow up and become protectors of the community. Today in 2014, this black woman is no longer valid. And she is not valid because she doesn't apply the two basic principles which I mentioned that have always made women dear to their nations. Those principles, once again, are making sure their lineage prospers and preserving their heritage. The black woman of today does not care about her family's lineage because she does not seek the moral approval of any men in her society because she foolishly believes that she can do no wrong and the only being that can judge her is God. This backwards ideal is spread across the spectrum of the black community by black churches and religious leaders, black professors and teachers throughout academia, black celebrities, athletes, and all who work in the world of entertainment, as well as everyone else that works in a segment which make up a society. This message is driven even further through every form of media, be it literature, artwork, film, video, radio, television programming, advertisements, you name it. This spoon-fed marketing has left black women bloated with conceit. Today's black woman does not care about her culture and making sure the legacy of her heritage lives on through her children, because she is more concerned with feeding her glamour-induced state of mind. You will not see any classic photos of family members and loved ones in picture frames on the wall or sitting in living rooms at this woman's home, because she is too busy taking selfie pictures of her damn self with her titties and ass exposed for the world to see on Facebook and Instagram. She ain't passing no recipes to her daughters because she does not cook anything herself unless it's something she can toss in a microwave. And even then, she feels that stepping foot in her own kitchen is a form of oppression, whereas the women of the past were prideful about their kitchens. This new millennium woman will not enrich her children by teaching them about their elderly relatives and ancestors because she's too busy telling her sons that their daddies ain't shit. That is why her sons walk around expressing such manic depressive behaviors with bags under their eyes from years of sleep deprivation. That is why they roam around with pants sagging off the back of their ass, letting everyone in the world know that they have given up. That is why he will name his debut rap album, Ready to Die.
Ready to die while I act that way. Pop Duke, left Mom Duke, the faggot took the back way.
And he will fill every song with tales of how he helped destroy his community, instead of songs with inspiration and hope.
Wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more back thinking, time for thinking ahead.
And black woman, you are so clueless that you don't realize that his gangster rhymes are a call for help.
I don't wanna live no more. Sometimes I hear death knocking at my front door. I'm living every day like a hustle. Another drug juggle. Another day, another struggle.
Black woman, you are so lost that you don't see that when he calls women bitches and hoes in his songs, he's subliminally talking about you.
I feel the world's against me and the women are so dirty. I hate women today because my mama used to hurt me. I think I'm going crazy, that no longer can I
plays that new stupid prank where he sets himself on fire in the shower. He is masking his suicidal pain through jokes. No different than when Richard Pryor did it in the 1970s.
I could have been prejudiced. I could have been, man, but I'm a nice white man just coming.
Hello, little boys. Your mother home? I'd like a blowjob.
And you must remember that he too set himself on fire in the early 1980s. And see, black woman, Pryor represented the beginning of many of the things we see in our society today. Because when he was doing his comedy on stage and recording records, people listened to them secretly in the privacy of their basements. Today, all one has to do is walk out of their home and do an early morning yawn and stretch before hearing someone driving by playing music that tells you that you are a bitch, skeezer, hoe, sack chaser, thought, or whatever new term the youth of today use to describe their own mothers, because they have no respect whatsoever for you. And why should they, when you have shown them over the last 20 years or so that you embrace the degradation? 3 years ago, I was asked to film an underground hip-hop event out in Baltimore. And one of the youngsters that was performing was doing your normal modern-day rap about how he was knee-deep into criminal activity and had no love for the bitches and hoes. And after he was done doing his song, he did something that totally amazed me. He paid homage to his mother, who was standing in the middle of the audience, clapping and cheering this madness on.
I know I don't have any more stage time left, but I just want to give a shout out to my mom's real quick. That's her right there. She inspired me to start my gangster rap career.
And this sadly would not be the last time that I saw such ignorance. In fact, if you look up my old video, Wherever Single Mothers Go, Crime Follows, there is a clip of murdered rapper Little JoJo's mother on stage while her other son is rapping with a cup of liquor on stage, looking like a groupie who can't wait to get backstage. And this is why you are no longer valid, black woman, because whenever a group of women refuse to seek the validation of men and they begin validating themselves, or worse off, only accepting the approval of children, it is an absolutely pathetic attempt to repaint and recast an illusion of success over obvious failure.
These last two are for the brothers as well as the sisters, but the isoflavones and the phytoestrogens, you should be very mindful of that, because this is what they're putting in the soy formulas. And you have to remember that a baby of the years of at least a month-of-a-year-old boy, especially for you mothers, a month-old boy is kicking out as much testosterone his own size as a full-grown adult. If you're giving that boy phytoestrogenic materials that are in the soy products, then you are kicking materials into his body that is developing right now, that's training his genetics to shut down his production of testosterone. With that artificial estrogen in his system, it's going to start affecting his hypothalamus and his ability to create the proper amount of testosterone for that male body to grow. It will end up shrinking his hypothalamus. The hypothalamus of a male is larger than a female. In gay men, it shrinks down to the size of a female. So they are creating homosexuals simply because, I tell you, when they were creating homosexuals as a form of birth control. Because guess what? No homosexual is going to go out making no babies. And the problem is, it's heterosexuals that's making homosexuals. Homosexuals can't make themselves. That's why they're trying to play it off as being a natural thing. It ain't natural. They are unnaturally manipulating your genetics to create this unnatural being. And the secret is, and listen carefully, brothers and sisters, whenever an entity, a biological entity, begins to create its own offspring, and that offspring becomes unlike the father and the mother, that's the end of days. Listen carefully now. Whenever an entity begins to create entities unlike itself, that's the end of days. The homosexual community thinks it's real now, and since it's being incorporated into the system as being natural and normal, rights and so forth, of course people who have homosexual tendencies right now, I have friends who are homosexuals, will say to me, well, you're so intolerant. You're just a gay hater, or you're a gay basher. What are some of the other names they use to protect this deformity again? Give me another one. Homophobic, that's a good one. Huh? What was that one? What was that one? Huh? Oh yeah. Well, my father, when we were looking at TV together back then, when it was about this big and square and made of steel, y'all kids wouldn't know nothing about that. We were looking at it, and I think some guy named George Balanchine came on, and he was doing ballet, you know, the cup and everything. And I was looking at this, and he just turned to me and said, if I ever see you dressed like that, I will kick your natural black ass. He said, I will beat you on stage. Because he said he was training me not to be influenced by it. He said, I will whip your ass. And he said, of course, today that's just so intolerant. Listen, we had in Africa a policy of incorporating that kind of imbalance and not persecuting it. We would say, okay, that person essentially channeled a whole other kind of energy if he was a homosexual. But we ain't want to actually say that's what it is. That man coming through here as a homosexual will be an indicator of something wrong in the strain. Not embracing. See, you have adopted the Eurocentric way of thinking, and that is to incorporate and embrace sickness as natural, because that's what they were. 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 That's what they were.